Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The parents of a 6-week-old girl who remains in hospital after being sexually assaulted appeared in court today. We have the details. Alert and Lethbridge police showed off a record seizure of over $1 million worth of drugs, guns, and cash. And we hear from the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy on why gas prices have been spiking across much of southwestern Alberta.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. We begin our newscast with a story that is drawing out emotions from many here in our community. The parents of a 6-week-old baby girl made an appearance in Lethbridge court for a bail hearing on Wednesday morning. The couple faces various charges. The little girl remains at Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary in critical condition. BCN's Naveen Day is outside of the courthouse and has the latest. Naveen?
Well, Hal, I arrived at the Lethbridge courthouse shortly before 9 a.m. in the morning, and there already was a significant number of protesters on site. Now, one thing that you'll notice is how specific the signs are. They're not saying anything vague like justice for baby. A lot of them are very specific. They want to see bail denied, and they want the stiffest of penalties to be applied to this couple, who are a 52-year-old male and a 31-year-old female. In fact, one of the signs reads, "Where's the attempted murder charge?" So the idea is not just to make noise, but to send a specific message to the judge and the Crown. Now, this rally was put together by an Edmonton-based group called Dads on Guard, and according to the organizers, this case is personal.
I'm a survivor from child sexual assault. Hearing about this story, it really hit my heart. You know, the fact that someone who's put in that position of authority and trust of that child could take that vulnerability from the child and completely ruin their life before they even had a chance to have one. It just breaks my heart.
I came out after 40 years, and I find that with bringing out my voice, a lot of other men are coming forward, and that was our whole goal, is to have more people come forward and let everybody know like what's happening in society. And I mean, we got to put a stop to it. We have to do something. The minimum mandatory for distribution and manufacturing child pornography here is only 12 months. These guys are getting 8 months, and then they're released, usually under a publication ban. That's a slap on the wrist. These victims are having lifelong consequences.
That was Dads on Guard, a group formed in 2021. Back to you, Hal.
Thanks so much, Naveen. We go now to Jeanette Rocher, who attended the court hearing earlier today. Jeanette, what happened inside of the courtroom?
Yeah, Hal, during the short appearance today, only defense attorney John Oman appeared on screen to request a remand for disclosure, saying he only received the information for his client late Tuesday night. The judge granted the remand until Friday, but Crown Prosecutor Don Janicki told the court the Crown plans to oppose bail during the hearing. The two accused, who cannot be identified because of a publication ban to protect the infant's identity, are being charged separately. The man faces charges of aggravated assault, sexual contact with a child, and failing to provide the necessaries of life, while the woman faces a single charge of failing to provide the necessaries of life. Both remain in custody at the Lethbridge Correctional Center.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Police say more than $1 million worth of drugs and cash were seized in Lethbridge. Alert and LPS held a press conference on Wednesday morning, and officials say the huge bust took place December 20th, involving 2 homes and 2 vehicles. Video journalist Micah Quinn has the details.
This is one of, if not the largest drug seizures in Lethbridge history.
Officials from Alert told us the drugs seized included 5.2 kilograms of methamphetamine, 3.2 kilograms of cocaine, 1.6 kilograms of fentanyl powder, 418 grams of ketamine, 35 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, and $79,000 of cash. Alert also seized 4 firearms, including a sawed-off shotgun and a loaded handgun.
Approximately 100 Albertans die every month as a result of opioid consumption, and the vast majority of that is fentanyl related. So getting these street drugs, this harmful substance off the streets, is significant.
Patrick Rodney faces a laundry list of offenses, including various drug and weapons-related charges. He's also charged with breaching his probation. Rodney is currently bound by a firearms prohibition, and in 2014, he was previously charged and investigated by Alert. He remains in custody, and his next court appearance is scheduled for January 26th. Alert began investigating Rodney in October of last year after receiving information about his suspected drug trafficking activity. Staff with LPS said getting these drugs off the streets is vital for the safety of our city.
It will certainly save lives out there when you have these drugs that are killing people every day. So less of it is certainly going to contribute to that.
In February of 2017, our city's largest drug bust took place when Alert and LPS seized $1.2 million in ecstasy pills, cannabis, and psilocybin mushrooms. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley says if her party forms government this May, it would scrap the $2 million COVID-19 review panel headed up by former Reform Party leader Preston Manning. Notley says Premier Daniel Smith should instead focus on helping struggling families with inflation rather than paying Manning $253,000 for the review. She also says it's important to attract more investment here to our province. She made the comment following the announcement from Google that its DeepMind AI research office in Edmonton is shutting down.
But without investment, we are at significant risk of losing our competitive advantage, which is exactly what has happened under this UCP government, as evidenced by DeepMind deciding to close its office in Edmonton, but not in Montreal or Toronto, two offices which actually opened after Edmonton's. While multiple programs that support the tech sector in Alberta have been cut or cancelled by the UCP, the Quebec AI supercluster attracted over $1 billion in funding between 2018 and 2020, and rather than cutting it, Quebec actually followed through on its $100 million tech and AI strategy.
Well, we saw some flurries across much of southwestern Alberta today, but still slightly above our normal temperature for this time of year, which is around -2. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, we should maybe enjoy these milder temperatures because next week that mercury will be plummeting.
Yeah, and I don't even want to think about what is headed our way, Hal, because it's not so nice. Here my brain was thinking that it was already springtime. I was kind of tricked into believing that with the weather, but come this weekend, things are going to look a whole lot different with that mercury plummeting down way into the minuses. For now, though, in the rest of the work week, we are looking at the pluses. Overnight low of 1 degree. We're looking at a 60% chance of rain showers or flurries accompanied by an 80-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts. Those gusts remaining into tomorrow, but look at that high, though, for Thursday, 8 degrees. After that, yeah, that temperature is going to plummet. I will be back later in the newscast to give you the grim news about next week's forecast. Okay, thanks so much, Jeanette. You may have noticed in Lethbridge that the price of gas has gone up 13 cents a litre at many retailers. We went from $1.20.9 to $1.33.9 virtually overnight. Why the huge increase? Well, Dan McTagg has a bit of an idea. Dan is the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, and he joins us now from Oakville, Ontario to chat about it. Dan, bottom line, why the increase?
Well, you've had it good right across the province. Not only have retailers refused to pass on the increased prices that they were being charged starting since the beginning of the, I would say the beginning of the month, but actually in the last week and a half or so before the New Year's. It now costs gas stations, about $1.27 to buy their fuel. Even with the province's move to remove all provincial taxes, it still means that, if you're selling for $1.23.9 and it's costing you $1.27.6 to buy your fuel without the margin to be able to turn on your hydro, to turn on your pumps, to pay your staff, to pay your overhead, sooner or later, the banks are going to come calling. Either that or your rich uncle who spotted you some money is going to be pretty upset.
So can we expect more increases from retailers as they try to pump up their margins?
Gas stations don't operate on zero margin. I mean, they have to make anywhere between 6 and 10 cents a liter. Remember, they still have to honor credit cards. That's usually 1 or 2%. As I mentioned earlier, the hydro to turn on the pumps, the cost of taxes, municipal taxes, property taxes. paying your staff, paying your overhead, paying yourself, paying off your mortgage. These are things that just can't be done when you're selling gasoline at a cost that's well below what is required to purchase the fuel in the first place. So the replacement cost, to understand, right here in Lethbridge today, is about $1.27. So $1.33. I mean, that's a pretty skinny margin. Take away 5% on that 6 cents difference, you're looking at no more than maybe 4.5 cents a liter. I think there's probably some more upward movement, perhaps as much as 3 or 4 cents a liter, but nobody wants to go first because they know they'll lose the all-important customer if they go any higher.
Thanks so much, Dan. That was Dan McTagg, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy, joining us from Oakville, Ontario. Canada's premiers have been invited to sit down and chat with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about health care next month in Ottawa. The PM says the government is not taking a one-size-fits-all approach on the health care issue, but noted there will be elements of an agreement that would apply to all of Canada.
I think one of the strengths of our approach to health care in this country is that different provinces and different regions get to respond to their needs in different ways, and they get to respond in ways that are better suited to their particular situations. That's certainly something that we don't think applying a one-size-fits-all across the country is the best way to do it. But there will be elements of what we're working on that will be an agreement with the entire country.
The premiers have gone on record saying they want Ottawa to increase its share of healthcare funding from 22 to 35%. Political reporter Brian Lilly says Justin Trudeau has a real problem with Canada's premiers using the notwithstanding clause when they don't agree with policies set forward by Ottawa. Mr. Lilly says this may be a little ironic considering Justin Trudeau used the Emergencies Act not that long ago.
He claims that the Emergencies Act is charter compliant. Well, guess what? So is the notwithstanding clause that he wants to curtail the use of. How can I say that? It's in the charter. It's part of the charter. So, his logic doesn't hold, but this is a political move, Hal. He's having his cabinet retreat in Ontario. He's fighting against Doug Ford, not, super hard, but he's trying to remind women voters who are, teachers or educational assistants or nurses in the 905 where he needs to win. Hey, Doug Ford took away your right to strike, but I'm going to protect it.
Mr. Lilly and I will also discuss the latest poll numbers, which has the federal Conservatives in a comfortable lead over the Justin Trudeau Liberals. Details coming up after business news. The city of Lethbridge released more details of its lease agreement with the Blood Tribe and its takeover of the city shelter. The Blood Tribe will pay annual rent of just under $100,000. Both parties may agree to mutually renew the agreement for as many as 4 one-year terms. The lease can be terminated with 30 days' notice, and both parties will meet by February 28th to discuss maintenance and replacement projects that may be needed for the shelter. The Blood Tribe will also be responsible for utility costs. Now, the Blood Tribe says around 70% of the shelter's occupants are Indigenous. The Blood Tribe Department of Health officially took over our city's largest shelter from the Alpha House earlier this month. A local cheerleading club is gearing up for a very special event in Orlando, Florida on April the 19th. Peak Elite's cheerleading tumbling team, called Everest, is headed to the World Cheerleading Championships. The event features hundreds of teams in more than 20 divisions. Staff from the organization say they're excited to head down to try and win the very big prize.
To go to the World Championships, we compete in levels 5, 6, or 7. So we have those high caliber athletes that are now ready to take on the World Championships. And it's been a dream of theirs since they were very young. The excitement is very real, and it's very, very competitive. So we went against 17 other teams in levels 5, 6, and 7 this weekend. And the top 9 came home with bids for the World Championships in Orlando. What's even more exciting is we're the first team from Lethbridge, period, doing cheerleading to make this happen.
Up next for the group is the Imagine Cheer and Dance Championships in Calgary, taking place on February the 4th. Good luck. In dealing with staff shortages, more Manitoba school divisions are looking at hiring substitute teachers, even if they're not certified. The Manitoba Teacher Society says the use of non-certified teachers has been going on for many years in rural regions. Brandon, Sunrise, and Western School Divisions all have job postings up and are not requiring applicants to be certified teachers. The Society says in the past, larger urban centers like Winnipeg and Brandon have not had a shortage of substitutes, but that is no longer the case. Scientists are now saying gene therapy directly to the brain is holding great promise. The first brain-delivered gene therapy on the market was recently approved in Europe for a rare genetic disorder called AADC deficiency.
When Riley Ann was about 3 months old, I noticed some signs that she wasn't making any milestones. I would look at some videos of other babies because I'm a new parent, and just seeing her so different from the other babies. She wasn't rolling, she wasn't moving much.
We didn't want to be those parents that were fretting over every little thing, but definitely by 3 months we were seeing these signs of eyes crossing, tongue thrusting, twisting of the limbs, and becoming tense. No sleep, watching your daughter suffer, not having an answer. And as a father, I want to be proactive. I want to do something. And my wife is bawling her eyes out. My daughter's in pain, and there's nothing I can do. Okay, step 1.
Her official diagnosis is called AADC deficiency. I remember Googling, and it says no cure available. And at the time, my heart just shattered, and I thought it was over.
Once we learned that there was a clinical trial spot open, we were so thankful. The doctor told us she had to be eligible, so they were going to do some checks on her, and then we had to keep her alive. Before that point, every month we were in the ICU.
Either she gets gene therapy or she dies.
The reason that gene therapy is so promising, especially for some of these patients that have these rare genetic diseases, is potentially you could have one procedure or one infusion within the brain. And just by having the one procedure, you're able to correct the genetic defect so that the patient has restorative life for the rest of their life.
You know, for some students, school lunches consist of bland, mass-produced reheated meals. But some school districts south of the border are upgrading their cafeteria menus with local organic produce, grass-fed meats, and even homemade recipes.
People just see school lunch, or they'll hear, oh, I have to get school lunch, and they'll automatically think, ew, gross, I have to get school lunch. I'd rather just wait till after school and get regular food.
When you think of schools and you think of the cafeterias, they should look like restaurants. They should feel like restaurants and not fast food chains.
And so what we found is that students, by eating healthy, nutritious, scratch-made meals, they transfer that positive experience they've had with us into the classroom, and it supports their academic achievements. And so as part of our tagline and our brand as a department, we say nurturing kids towards academic excellence.
Some tasty-looking meals there. Well, the snow we received in southwestern Alberta tapered off today, and we should be well above zero over the next few days. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. It looked a bit like a snow globe earlier today in Lethbridge with some of the light flurries we received. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, a lot of the white stuff should be melting before a deep freeze sets in, just in time for the weekend?
Yeah, that's right. A snow globe is the perfect way to describe what we saw earlier today. But yeah, we are going to be seeing a lovely high of 8 degrees on a Thursday. Of course, it's going to be accompanied with wind gusts up to almost 80 kilometers per hour. And we are looking at more snow beginning of Friday. So high of 2 degrees there. And after that, we're kind of out of our seasonal for this time of year. We're back down to minus 16 on Saturday, down to minus 19 Sunday, minus 10 the high for both Monday and Tuesday. So yeah, according to the almanac, the average high for this time of year, minus 2, average low, minus 14. We are going to be much lower than that next week, unfortunately. Sorry to give you that bad news there. The high on this day was back in 2006, and it was 16 degrees, and it was a Very freezing, minus 39 back in 1943. 8:13 is when the sun rose this morning, and sun set this evening at 5:14. So here's the good news. We jumped into that 9-hour mark. So we're looking at 9 hours and 1 minute of daylight all of a sudden, just like that. Okay, we're looking at a chance of drizzle on the west coast tomorrow for both Victoria and Vancouver. High of 7 in Victoria, 5 degrees the high in Vancouver, 4 degrees the expected high tomorrow in Edmonton, and a high of 6 degrees in Calgary with a mix of sun and cloud. As we look to the rest of the prairies, Saskatchewan could see a risk of freezing rain, high of 4 degrees there, minus 3 the high, and Regina could be seeing a mix with snow and some rain, and a minus 9 the high in Winnipeg. Also, Winnipeg expecting those flurries tomorrow. As we look into the central part of the country, we are seeing snowfall warnings in effect for tonight, but it should end by tomorrow morning in Toronto. They're expecting about 15 centimeters overnight. Minus 1 the high tomorrow, minus 4 the high in Ottawa tomorrow, and minus 3 in Montreal. All of those cities seeing that snow kind of petering off by tomorrow afternoon. Fredericton looking at a high of 9 degrees. Now we are seeing wind warnings and rainfall warnings in this whole area here. So Fredericton could see up to 20 to 30 millimeters of rain mixed with 2 to 4 centimeters of snow, up to 40 millimeters of rain in Halifax, high of 10 degrees there, minus 8 the high in Charlottetown, expecting rain as well as 100 kilometer per hour winds and 100 kilometer per hour winds in St. John's as well, with a high of 0 tomorrow. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
The Bank of Canada raised its trend-setting rate by 0.25 percentage point to 4.5%. That's the highest level since 2007. Governor Tiff Macklem says a further increase to the central bank's rate depends on whether economic developments keep in line with its latest forecast. Inflation is still hovering around 6%, and Macklem says that's still too high.
CPI inflation declined to 6.3% in December, reflecting lower energy prices and some moderation in the prices for durable goods as supply improved and demand softened. Lower gasoline prices are welcome, but prices of essentials like groceries and rent continue to increase too quickly. Measures of core inflation have also been stuck at about 5%. With 3 months rates below year-over-year increases, core inflation will likely start to come down in the months ahead. Still, core inflation needs to continue to decline for total CPI inflation to get back to the 2% target.
The Bank of Canada projects growth in the economy will stall for the first 6 months of the year, while inflation will hopefully ease to 3% by later this summer. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says Canadians cannot continue to absorb these high interest rates while it's causing even more stress for families. He says the Trudeau Liberals really need to get their spending under control.
This is the 8th increase in less than a year. In fact, rates are now 16 times, the Bank of Canada rate is 16 times higher than it was a year ago. Why? Well, the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary Trudeau deficits are bidding up the goods we buy and the interest we pay. He's added more debt than all previous prime ministers combined.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 29 points on the day to finish at 20,599. The Dow was up 9 points to 33,743. The S&P 500 was down a point to 4,016, and the Nasdaq was down 20 points to 11,313. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 29 cents to $80.42 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 26 cents to $3 US. Gold was down 6 cents to $19.4605 US an ounce, and silver was up 23 cents to $23.91 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.03 per bushel, barley's at $9.25, canola's at $18.18, and corn is at $11.18 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was down 25 cents to $157.60. Feeder cattle January contract was up 45 cents to $179.40, and lean hogs February contract was down 30 cents to $76.80. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $74.71 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the case of the two Lethbridge parents accused of abusing their 6-week-old daughter and failing to provide the necessaries of life has been adjourned until January 27th. The defense lawyer requested a remand of disclosure, saying the only information he received came on Tuesday. The Crown told the court that they oppose bail for the couple and that they're being charged separately. There's also a publication ban, so no names are being released to protect the identity of the child, who remains in critical condition at the Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is apparently not a big fan of Canadian premiers using the notwithstanding clause. Political reporter Brian Lilly says that may be a little bit ironic considering our PM used the Emergencies Act on protesters with the Freedom Convoy last winter. Mr. Lilly will have more details for us shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cabinet are in Hamilton, Ontario for a caucus retreat. Our Prime Minister is talking about trying to curtail the use of the notwithstanding clause by premiers. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, Trudeau says he's a defender of freedoms. This may drip of a little irony considering how our Prime Minister used the Emergencies Act last winter to those who participated in the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah, he seems to think that invoking the Emergencies Act was not suspending civil liberties. And in fact, he's made that claim. Several cabinet ministers have made that claim. They say that, well, the Emergencies Act is charter compliant, so civil liberties weren't suspended. And yet you read the Emergencies Act, you read the regulations of what was actually implemented. You couldn't protest at Parliament Hill. You couldn't travel to certain areas. Those are all charter rights being curtailed. There was so much more that the Prime Minister did. Even his vaccine mandate saying you had to be vaccinated to get on a plane, a train, or a boat that went between provinces in Canada. That's an infringement of mobility rights, which are in the Charter. But, you know, as I said, he claims that the Emergencies Act is charter compliant. Well, guess what? So is the notwithstanding clause that he wants to curtail the use of. How can I say that? It's in the Charter. It's part of the Charter. So, you know, his logic doesn't hold, but this is a political move, Hal. He's having his cabinet retreat in Ontario. He's fighting against Doug Ford, not, you know, super hard, but he's trying to remind women voters who are, you know, teachers or educational assistants or nurses in the 905 where he needs to win. Hey, Doug Ford took away your right to strike, but I'm going to protect it. He's not worried about seeming to be hypocritical to convoy protesters whose votes he's not going to get. This is a political trial balloon aimed at those people whose votes he needs and whose votes Pierre Poilievre needs in the next election. That's suburban women.
Brian, it appears as though a record number of people crossed into Canada at Roxham Road last year. What kind of numbers are we really talking about here?
More than 39,000, which, to put it in perspective, that's bigger than the population of Spruce Grove, Alberta. It's bigger than the population of Bradford, Ontario, just north of Toronto. Bigger than the population of Shawinigan. We can go on. It's a significant, we imported a small city into this country through one illegal crossing last year. The second highest month on record since all of this started in January of 2017 was December 2022. I think it was more than 4,600 that crossed in December. The weather's not good. There's a lot of snow. You know, the second or the highest month on record was over 5,500 in August of 2017, when the weather is good, when it's a lot nicer to travel through the woods and across a culvert to come into Canada illegally. But yeah, we are doing a rate of importing people through this illegal border crossing at double the highest previous year. If you took 2017 and 2018, the two highest previous years, and added them together, you wouldn't get as many people as crossed over last year, which is why this is an issue, which is why the Quebec government's calling for it to be closed. A strong majority in Quebec want it closed. And we're finding out things like $94 million spent on hotels booked by the federal government to house the people coming across at Roxham Road.
But why do you say they crossed into our country illegally? Many say there's nothing illegal about this, and these are actually asylum seekers.
Well, there's a big giant sign, several big giant signs at this illegal border crossing saying that it's illegal to cross there. The reason that we get into semantic games is that once you cross over, and by the way, there's the giant signs, plus the RCMP gives verbal warnings, do not cross here, it is illegal, you will be arrested. And then the people come across, and yes, they're arrested by the RCMP, but then they claim asylum. And once they're on Canadian soil in Canada, they get to claim asylum. That's why people say, well, they're not illegal immigrants, they're asylum seekers. They came into the country illegally. They're using a loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement, something that has to be fixed. They're economic migrants trying to jump the queue. Most of them don't have their asylum claims accepted. They're rejected as not being legit refugees. That's in the overwhelming majority of cases. So that's why we get into semantic games. Look, this is the reason that I feel that the Trudeau Liberals haven't fixed this problem yet is they want to import yet another American wedge issue. They've done it with abortion. They've done it with guns. Now they want to do it with illegal immigration so that they can turn around and say anybody opposed to Roxham Road is against legal immigration. You find in the United States that there's a strong support for legal immigration among supporters of Democrats and Republicans, but there's not strong support for illegal immigration. But the parties try and, fudge the issue, muddy it up the waters. That's what Trudeau's trying to do here, in my view.
Healthcare is a real hot button topic these days, Brian. There's a lot of chatter about certain provinces moving to use private clinics in their system and calls for the feds to stop it. Apparently, that's not happening. Is there a change in tone in Ottawa?
Yeah, there appears to be. Look, Ontario got the headlines last week, but Ontario is not the first province to move in this direction. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said, we've got a surgical backlog. We've got diagnostic testing backlog. We need to fix this. Our hospitals are at capacity, so we're going to allow 49,000 hours of MRI and CT scan imaging to be done in private clinics. You know what? In Ontario, like in Alberta, if you go for an x-ray, chances are it's in a private clinic already. Alberta does close to 20% of its outpatient surgery in these independent health facilities. Some are not-for-profit, some are for-profit. BC, not quite as high as Alberta, but definitely up there, and that's under an NDP government. So yeah, Ontario's moving in the same direction, and suddenly people in Ottawa got outraged that Ontario was doing it. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who represents a British Columbia riding, I've never heard him complain about the NDP government allowing that there. He's never raised the issue about Alberta or Saskatchewan or Quebec, but he got outraged about Doug Ford doing it and said, Trudeau has to stop this, or I'll consider withdrawing my support from the coalition of the clueless. And Trudeau turned around and he didn't say, yes, I'll withdraw, or I'll force Ford to stop. He called it innovation. And he said the provinces are responsible for delivering healthcare. They need to be allowed to innovate. So that's a good sign. We're not going to go towards an American-style private medical system, Hal. And you and I, being gentlemen of a certain age, we should appreciate that because, the medical insurance that we could buy in the private market now would be a heck of a lot more than what we could have bought at 18. So, yeah, I'm good with that. But most people don't care how their health care is delivered, just that they pay with their health card, not their credit card, when they go to get the care. And that's what's happening here. And Trudeau says he's okay with that.
And I'm still praying to get a doctor for myself and my family here in Alberta. Such a shortage, Brian. Brian, let's talk international news now. And Poland says it will send German-made tanks to Ukraine, and Germany says they will not block the transfer. Now, is Canada ready to send some tanks as well in Ukraine's efforts to stop the Russian aggression and the war with Russia?
Despite the strong rhetoric from the Trudeau government, no, not yet. And the Prime Minister was asked about this just the other day. He was in Toronto, and someone put the question to him, and he gave a long answer about how strongly Canada supports Ukraine, and that we give more than others. That's not really true, but he wouldn't commit to allowing the tanks to be sent. Now, this is something that we've talked about before, but then said we can't do it because Germany has a veto. They manufacture the tanks, and part of our agreement to purchase them is that we can't sell them or transfer them to another country without say-so of the German government. Not dissimilar to what we do with exports of military products made in this country. It's part of an attempt by responsible governments to make sure that we're not selling to an ally who then turns around and sells it to a warlord somewhere that we are going to be concerned about. So this is a normal thing for Germany to have this veto right. But they're indicating that they're going to waive it for Poland. Of course, they would waive it for Canada. Why would we not immediately say, if we're so fond of this idea, why wouldn't we immediately say, you know what, go ahead? But I'll say this, there's another thing that we could do that we're not doing, Hal, that wouldn't consist of us giving away our military equipment or even our money. The Canadian government, the Bank of Canada, have seized Russian assets. These are not our assets. It's not our tax dollars. We have seized Kremlin-controlled funds of both the government and its supporters that were held in this country. We could turn around and give that cash, much of it in cash, to the Ukrainians to fight against Putin right now. We could do that and it wouldn't cost us, and we're still not doing that. So despite the rhetoric, the actions don't match the words.
Brian, one of Justin Trudeau's allies on the international stage, New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern, announced that she's stepping down and not seeking re-election. Her polling numbers were way down, much like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's. Now she's walking away from the public life, but you don't think Trudeau will do the same, considering his numbers?
No, there was some chatter about that last week. Most of the chatter was about how strong of a leader she was and how wonderful, and people saying she, praising her. That's normal when a politician exits, but also because she was a progressive woman, a lot of the chattering classes just were in love with her. Not everyone, and that's part of why she's leaving. In New Zealand, she's far less popular than she was. Her polling numbers are actually worse than Trudeau's, but not that far off. And that, in my view, is the real reason that she's leaving. So will Trudeau follow in her footsteps was the question. And based on his performance, his behavior over the last little while, the answer is no. Late last week, he was in Windsor, Ontario. He was asked about the anniversary of the Freedom Convoy, and he launched into a 5-minute tirade against Pierre Poilievre. This is a man who clearly is re-energized about his job. And by the way, he sees his job as campaigning. I don't think he's a particularly good, at governing. That's not what interests him, but he does like campaigning. And he's good at it. Whether you like him or not, he's won 3 elections for a reason. And he wants to have a fight with Pierre Poilievre. Whether that's a wise move or not, that remains to be seen. I think it'll depend on what the ballot questions are, because I'd say right now that if the ballot questions are the rise in violent crime and the rise in inflation, Pierre Poilievre has a good shot of being prime minister. If Trudeau's able to turn it around into something else, like the accusation he made that Poilievre was racist last week, if he's able to make that the ballot question, then Trudeau may stick around. But he clearly wants a fight. Unlike Ardern, who said she doesn't have gas left in the tank, Trudeau clearly does, and he's hitting the pedal trying to rev this engine up.
Brian, a lot of people would pay to watch Trudeau and Poilievre go at it, mano a mano, one-on-one in a debate for 2 hours, solid, but actually answer the questions, Trudeau, not skirt around the issues, but actually answer the questions. I think a lot of people would love to see that. Now, the latest poll from Nanos has the Conservatives with a 7-point lead over the Liberals, but what was interesting, Brian, in that poll is that Canadians apparently prefer Justin Trudeau over Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. How's that possible?
Personal brand and party brand don't always go hand in hand. And at various times, Trudeau has been more popular than his party. At other times, he's been less popular. And so the same's going to happen from time to time for Pierre Poilievre. The same's happened for Doug Ford here in Ontario. The UCP more popular than Jason Kenney was towards the end of his tenure. So, these sorts of things happen. Poilievre's still introducing himself to Canadians, and he needs to continue to talk about the issues that will resonate, that will make them say, okay, you are leading a government in waiting. I will consider switching my vote to you. I keep saying he's got to win the suburban women vote, whether that's in Calgary or Edmonton or Vancouver or Toronto. Those are the people that he's got to win over, because those were the people that gave Trudeau his slight edge in the last election to squeak in. Now, last time the election was won and lost over 2 issues: gun control and COVID response. And I've said it to you before. Trudeau went into lower mainland BC and into suburban Toronto, and he campaigned against Alberta's COVID response because if you remember, COVID was spiking through the roof. Alberta was having a lot of problems in the hospitals, and he said, if you don't elect me, you'll end up like them. In Alberta, don't do that. It's enough to scare people over. COVID's not going to be an issue. And despite all of his gun control efforts, violent crime's up. Trudeau may not be able to go back to that well. So Poilievre has to speak to issues that matter. And right now, that's the rise in violent crime and the rise in inflation. Just look at your grocery bill next time you're at the store.
Brian, a court ruling last week said Canada must repatriate 4 Canadian citizens held by Kurdish forces in Syria. Brian, these are all men who allegedly went to fight for ISIS. Why do we need to rescue them?
3 of them, I kind of understand the legal reasoning and why the judge is pushing that way. A 4th one, a guy named Jack Letts, nicknamed Jihadi Jack, I don't understand at all because he's a Canadian of convenience. He's someone who was born in the United Kingdom. He visited Canada as a child with his parents. One of his parents is Canadian, so he has Canadian citizenship that way, but he's never lived here. He has no connection to this country, but the Brits stripped him of his citizenship because he went to go fight for ISIS. I'm sorry, Hal, my parents are from the UK. That'd be like me saying, okay, I need the British government to bail me out of a situation, and I've never lived there. I've only gone to visit family. It's not right. The Kurds have wanted rid of all of these men for quite some time. Many countries have taken their their nationals back from the Kurds because the Kurds say, we don't have a jail for them. These people are not our problem. They're yours. The judge's ruling was that the Kurds want to get rid of them. The Canadian government won't give them travel documents. They won't give them passports. They won't give them permission to enter the country, and you're violating their rights. I don't like it, but I'm not shocked that's where the courts went on this. But it is outrageous that it applies to someone who's never lived here and has next to no connection to this country. That is truly outrageous.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Hal.
When you hear the name Arthur Pawlowski, you know there's probably some kind of controversy going on. He's the founder of Calgary Street Church, which has been ministering to the poor and addicted in downtown Calgary for many years. He's very outspoken and has been arrested many times for his various protests against pandemic restrictions, as well as taking part in the trucker convoy demonstrations. He's now also venturing into provincial politics, starting up a new party called the Independence Party. Arthur Pawlowski joins me now. Art, thanks so much for being here. And I understand you're joining us from Calgary, where I believe you're still under house arrest.
Yes, thank you so much for having me in. You are correct. I am still on house arrest. I am still facing 10.5 years of imprisonment by the UCP government. And that's why one of the reasons that I actually joined the political realm. When I was in a solitary confinement, I realized those people will not allow me to just be a pastor. So I have to stand up, rise up. And if they will not allow me to be a pastor, I will become a pastor politician. And what was chasing me yesterday, I shall be chasing tomorrow. That was one of the reasons.
Okay, wow. Well, I mean, you've got a lot going on there. Can you maybe explain why you formed the Independence Party of Alberta? What are your beefs? What's the mission of the party?
Well, we have been observing our politics for the past decades, and it's going from bad to worse. Corruption, no accountability, no checks and balances whatsoever. We are missing billions of dollars from our coffers. The politicians will say one thing before the election and completely ignore us after the election. And I have been observing this for years, and I think like majority of Albertans, I am sick and tired of the flip-flopping politicians that will lie in your face. They are incredible speakers. I have to admit that they know how to lie, but then nothing comes out of their words. So I think what we need is completely brand new party, grassroots. We do not have politicians in our party. We are just like you. We are your neighbors, and we are ready to clean the swamp. I mean, I talked to hundreds of people just the other night, and I said, hey, we have a plumbing problem. We have the biggest sewer problem in the history of our beloved Canada. Well, I can be your plumber. I have a big plunger, and hire me. I'll clean your swamp.
Okay. Now, Art, I think that you would have to admit that as a fledgling political party, you might be unlikely to see any candidates elected this May, but are you doing this simply to draw attention to the issues at hand, or do you see yourself growing the party and eventually winning some seats down the road?
My friend, you have not been paying attention. In the past few months, we have thousands of new members. People are getting excited about the idea of someone that have been proving over and over again that I mean what I say. When Artur Pawlowski says something, that means I'm going to do it, even if it means me ending up in prison. As you know, if you were following my story, I have been arrested 16 times, over 340 citations, over 100 court cases. When I was in a solitary confinement, when they put me stripped naked, metal cages, you name it, 5 inmates testified already that the guards were giving them incentives to murder me. Well, I was pressured by the Crown prosecutors to say, I'm sorry for being part of the truck convoy. And I said that thousands of times, and I'm going to say it again. Being part of the truck convoy was one of the best things I've ever done on this soil. It was amazing. It was beautiful. I'm not sorry. The only regret I have is that I did not spend more time with our amazing Canadians, not less. So what I saw was amazing patriotism, love that I have not seen on this side of the border. I've seen people coming together from every walk of life, every creed, young and old, children bringing their pets, their dogs, their horses. I mean, feeding each other, praying with each other, singing with each other, hugging each other. It was absolutely amazing. I do not regret that. You see, I am not your typical politician. I am a pastor. I will never apologize for being a Christian. I will not apologize that I'm a pastor. And if you want a pastor that actually says what he means, well, I am your man. And I think it resonates with people. People are signing to the Independence Party left and right. Wherever we show up right now, it's hundreds of people that come, and people are excited. I thought that me being a pastor is going to be a hindrance. Actually, it's opposite. We had William Eberhard, a pastor, politician, Premier of Alberta. 350,000 people were listening to him every week as he preached from the pulpit on Sunday. Then Manning came. 600,000 people were listening to his sermons. He was the longest serving politician in the Commonwealth during that time. Well, we had 2 pastors premiers. Well, it's time for a third one.
Okay, now Art, maybe tell our viewers, what's the difference between your party as compared to other separatist parties in Alberta?
Well, we're not separatists. We want independence. No, put it this way. You are married to a very abusive husband. He is raping you, he's beating you up, and he's stealing money. And then the next day you come to him and say, hey, honey, I married you, but I don't have even enough to feed our children. And boom, you get another beating. And this is going on for over 100 years. Even before Alberta joined the Confederation, the East has been raping us, stealing from us, and destroying us. We want independence. You see, people are scared. The enemy is using the fear tactics. Says, hey, if you separate, you're going to be wiped out. You don't stand a chance. Well, listen to me. We want what Quebec has. Quebec has independence. They have their own pension. They have their own police. They are free, truly. They have a free province. We want what they have a little bit more as well. If they could do it, why can't we? Are they smarter than Albertans? Are they more, capable than Albertans? I don't think so. I think they were brave enough to say, hey, We want our freedom. That's what I want for Albertans. I want Albertans to dig into the resources. I mean, we are sleeping on oil. We can become truly Saudi Arabia of North America. I want to give incentives to the people for their own oil. Why everything is stolen from us? Why we pay taxes that are killing us and destroying the future of our children? Let's revive our economy. Let's dig what's rightfully ours. God has given it to us, and we are not able to do this because the federal government is destroying us, is wiping us out. And independence is not a separatist movement. Independence is a message. I want to be independent, and I hope you also want to be independent as well. Independent from the government overreach. We should be free. God, you see, my Jesus is the biggest freedom fighter that ever walked on earth. He says, who comes to me is free indeed. The truth shall set the captives free. That's what I want for my fellow Albertans.
Okay, so we know that you're a very strong believer in freedom. You call yourself Independence Party, but not separatist. But do you support Alberta separating?
Well, what we need to give voice back to the people. I have been all my life a strong advocate for referendum. In other words, I want to give that decision not to just few elected politicians, but to you, the people. What's wrong with us that we have given all the power to just a handful of people that are wiping us out, destroying us, and we have no say? I want that decision to come from you. What do you want? Do you want to be a separate country? Do you want to have independence? Do you want to have your own pension? Do you want to have your own resources? Do you want to tap into your own resources? Do you want to do business with other countries as well, or with our neighbors, down the border? That's up to the people. So I want to do referendums. Every year, Albertans should have a say on key issues. And that's what I propose. Within the first year of forming a majority government, we will give you that right, that voice, and you will tell us what you want. I'm not going to tell you what I want and by forcing you to accept my views. No, it's up to you. We all are in this together. And I believe that Albertans, it's time for Albertans to have their voice heard. So referendum. And we will see if we will get that document, because everything has to be done legally. I'm not talking about coup. I'm not talking about an armed resistance. Far from it. I'm a Polish immigrant. I've seen the power of the solidarity movement. All of that was done without firing one shot. There's more of us than the villains, believe it or not. So I want to give that voice back. When I get that document, a legal document of the referendum, then we'll have a different position within the Confederation, and we will force the federal government to accept what Albertans want, not what Ontario or Quebec wants.
Okay, well, you mentioned pension, and they're having your own pension. So one of those inevitable questions that arises is that if Alberta were to separate, what guarantee is there that Albertans would get their pensions that they've paid into for so long?
My God, if we have independence, my friends, you're going to have more, not less. You see, we do not have a money problem in our beloved nation. We have a spending problem. Those psychopaths, that's what they are. They are wasting our money left and right. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not careful, you will not have a pension. The way the federal government is proceeding left and right is wiping your future, and not just your future, but the future of your children. You will have no pension. If we have independence, we have resources like no other nation on earth. Like I said, we can become Saudi Arabia of North America. We can be billionaires here without a problem, and people can prosper. So you will have more, not less. Do not believe the lie. They are lying to you, telling you that if you have independence, then you're going to have less, not more. That's a lie. You will have more. Why? Because now we are paying 55% in combined taxes. I mean, that's absolutely unbelievable that people are putting up with this. I want the lower taxes. I want to put a cap on the minimum wage, that people would not have to pay taxes if they are, listen what is happening to us. People are struggling already. They cannot pay for their food. They cannot pay for their utilities, but we tax them anyway. They're not able, even if they wanted to get out of that hole. We got to put a cap on this. If you're making $60,000 or $80,000 combined, you don't pay taxes. We got to leave that money within the family so they can survive another day. But what the government is doing right now is taxing us to death. And that's exactly what we're seeing left and right. So don't believe the lie that your pension will suddenly disappear. We got trillions upon trillions of dollars in the ground. Build a pipe. And if British Columbia doesn't want it, we will build it to Montana, to our neighbors. If Montana doesn't want it, we're going to sell it to other countries. Look at Europe. There is a crisis. There's energy crisis. Dig that stuff out of the ground. God has given it to us.
Okay, I'm not going to use the word separate. I'll just say if Alberta were to become independent. So you definitely believe that it's affordable for Alberta to become independent. Some people would ask that there's, of course, cost to creating our own military or a central banking system or a judicial system. The list goes on. What about public health care? How would this work without money coming in from the federal government?
Well, here is the problem. It's our money. The federal government is not giving us anything. We are being raped and robbed. We give billions upon billions of dollars to the federal government, and then with their mercy, so graciously, they give us a portion of our own money. I say, let's keep it all. Let's keep all for Albertans. After all, Albertan politicians should be for Albertans. So we're going to have more, not less, because we will not be we're not going to be robbed by the federal government. We need the referendum. We need a legal document that we can sit down with the federal government and renegotiate our part within the Confederation. We cannot allow, you see, here is how the system works. We got British Columbia, Northwest Territory, Yukon, we have Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta. All of us combined together, we vote. But all of us combined, we have less representation, less seats, if you will, than Ontario alone. So every single time we combine together vote, we're being outvoted by the Ontario. Let's talk about the Supreme Court of Canada. We have 9 judges, 7 of them are from the East. Every single time there is an issue that should defend us, we are losing, because the whole thing is rigged. It has been created in such a way that we don't stand a chance. That's why we need the referendum. Quebec did it. It worked for them, and they've lost. As you know, they've lost twice, and yet they won. Imagine that. They've lost twice, and they are the victorious ones. I say, let's try it. If it worked for them, it will work for us as well.
Well, Art, thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate hearing all about your party, and much success to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm telling you, do not allow the enemy to scare you. They have been doing this for the past few years. I say to you, have hope that God is doing something powerful, and join other Albertans in this amazing adventure of getting back what's rightfully ours, the independence. Be blessed.
Thank you. Art Pawlowski is the leader of the Independence Party. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.